Do it.
Okay, I'm back with Ellen Frost, my flower bestie, and we're going to talk today about how to sell local flowers. Like not the necessarily the literal selling of the flowers, but how to pitch the idea of local blooms to your customer base so that you can get better buy-in from your customers. And so this is going to be a two-part conversation. In this episode, we're going to talk about how we're going to sell local to event clients. So that'd be weddings or florists, or sorry, not florists. We're florists, duh, Jenny. Weddings or corporate events or even something like big birthday parties or whatever. Where as traditional florists, or a traditional florist would be able to pull in a whole line of flowers and be like, this is definitely what we're going to have. This is, red roses, no problem. But as local based florists, how do we really build that trust and communicate with customers about what we're doing, because we won't necessarily have the flowers on hand to articulate it. So welcome back, Ellen. Thank you for being part of Floral Guild Radio once again.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. And you're currently spending time in warm Florida where there are actually flowers, but
There are.
here in cold Philadelphia, I am missing them quite a bit. So yeah, it's nice to know that you get to see some. So, all right, let's just dive right into the conversation. So both of us have done weddings for a
Yep.
very long time. I mean, have you ever stopped and actually counted how many weddings you've done?
I feel like I used to count.
Yeah.
I mean, you figure I did them for 17 years
Yeah.
and we did between like, I don't know, 40 and 100 depending on the
Right.
year.
Right.
That's so many weddings.
There's so many weddings. So you've probably done like, I don't know, like at least 1,000 weddings, right?
1,000 weddings? Oh my
Oh
God.
my God. My brain is blown. Yeah, I keep threatening to sit down and actually count
Yeah.
every single one that I've done. But then I get like overwhelmed by the thought of doing that and thinking just like I don't know. That's maybe that's a number I don't want to know. So
Let's
mine is
just call it a lot.
it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, I think I've done somewhere between 700 and 1,000, but
Yeah.
I don't know the exact number. So anyway, long story short, we both have a lot of experience
Yes.
selling local to wedding couples in particular. And then you do a lot of corporate events too at
Mhm.
local flowers, so or local color flowers. So how many do you have an idea of how many?
We do we do maybe a dozen to 15 big corporate events a year,
Okay.
for maybe 4 or 5 different corporate customers. So
Okay.
those are a lot of their events are annual events. So it's kind of like every year we do the same sort of events with them.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you have a lot more experience with that corporate element than I do. Like all the corporate work I've ever done has just been like flower bars for like
Right.
employee appreciation and stuff like that. So,
These are
um,
more like, corporate galas,
mm,
or, we work with a lot of private schools that have donor events, so a lot
yeah,
of, like, donor receptions, uh, a lot of, we work with one corporation that has a lot of, like, board meetings and board dinners and things like that, so those kind of events.
yeah. So maybe just a really quick, like sort of big picture question is, do you find the way you communicate to wedding couples versus corporate clients to be extremely different, or is it pretty much straightforward, the same thing, like maybe different price points and different expectations, obviously, because corporate, I assume, is a lot easier.
Yeah.
Uh, but are you still putting together the same proposals? Like, do they look the same,
No,
basically? No.
no.
Oh, okay. Do tell.
For corporate will be easier to chat about.
Yeah.
For us, our corporate customers, similarly to, I think, wedding customers, are corporations or schools or organizations that care about sourcing locally. So we have not like, won over, a random business that doesn't care about sustainability or, these are people who care about sourcing locally, who care about sustainability, who care about having a smaller footprint in their sourcing of flowers. So right off the bat, we have, some rapport that we both
Mhm.
share that commitment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that, of course, makes it much easier to be able to say, um, give me your color palette and I will create something that fits within your color palette. So, and this we can get into this with weddings too. We never are able to do mock-ups, or we're never
Right.
able to say in any specific way what flowers we're going to use. So usually the way it works with our corporate customers is that they will have a color palette that is mostly driven by a linen. So, these are, big corporate events where you've got 50 tables, and most of the things are driven by the linen. And the linen might be driven by the theme, or it might be driven by the corporate logo. Uh,
Hmm.
but mostly it's the linen that we aim to sort of work with.
To match. Yeah. Compliment. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we really just say, we will create centerpieces or whatever the pieces are that complement that linen. And that's about the extent of our proposal. Um,
Wow.
and that is partially because these are customers we've worked with for a long time. So we have built trust with them. And the way we have built trust is by saying, we'll do that, and then doing that. Where, maybe in the beginning it was a little trickier, and maybe we had to show some examples of past work. But I would say once we went through a series of, working with them for an event, they sort of understood, okay, they said they would choose the colors that would complement the linens. They did. It worked great. People liked it. And so there isn't really a lot of, other back and forth, which is
Mhm.
so great. I
That
mean,
is so nice.
it is like the easiest, best partnership, because we both want the same thing. I think we both want a beautiful centerpiece for the event. We want people to be happy with it, but we also don't, neither of us want to put a lot of time and effort into a back and
Hmm.
forth about,
Hmm.
this is just one piece of their corporate event. So,
Right.
for them, it's like almost like a checkbox. Like,
Yeah.
yes, we've got a beautiful centerpiece. Let's move on.
Yeah.
They're not trying to micromanage the process, and
Yeah.
that's
But
terrific.
yeah, and they're not like emotionally invested. The
No.
the corporate planners I worked with, it's like whatever. It's literally their job. Like
Yes,
it's just their job. They have to have flowers on the
get
table,
flowers.
and as long as they know you'll show up, then and it's
Yeah,
in the budget, that's pretty much what matters.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you find that you have the same working relationship with the same planners over and over again? Like in this, say like
Yeah,
at John Hopkins or wherever it is you work a lot, it's the
yeah.
same person every time.
We have had, we usually do have, consistency in those positions. We have had a couple situations where that position has changed,
Mm.
and we've had both things happen. One, we've had, the former person say to the new person, "This is my florist, just continue using them," which has been great. But we've also had corporate, especially, where a new person comes in and they come with their own florist. You know,
Oh,
they're an event person. They're basically doing events, usually
yeah.
fundraising, and they have worked with a florist, so they're bringing that relationship with them. So that has been a little bit tricky, and we have actually sort of lost customers based on
Oh.
that situation. Not a lot, but we have had that situation. And that's one thing I think I would point out about selling corporate stuff. We After we did corporate stuff for a few years, we were like, "Oh, this is great." Like, the people who like local, who like us, and do corporate stuff, these are more of the gigs we want to get. And so we
Hmm.
spent like a bunch of time searching out corporate and schools in our region who we thought would be a good fit, both like on the same wavelength about local and sustainable, and also people that we maybe had a connection with. And I'll say that the cold calling did not work at all.
Ah, yeah.
Even when we had a connection, like my former alma mater, even when we thought like the sustainability issue was a
Enough. Yeah.
connection,
Yeah.
um, it really was that a lot of the people who make those decisions either had a person that they liked and wanted to stick with them, just like probably we're in with
Hmm.
other people. We just didn't find that to be a great way to get new corporate customers. What
Hmm.
we found is really it's just having some connection, like somebody saying, "Hey, fundraiser, you should definitely check out this
Mm.
florist for this reason."
Yeah.
That was really the only way that we found worked for
Yeah.
us for really getting those corporate jobs.
Yeah, I had that experience where, based on your experience with John Hopkins and then our mutual friend Michelle, she has a great
Yeah,
account with Dickinson. And you
right.
guys were all like, "Oh, colleges." And I was like,
Colleges
"Oh, there's this great college literally right next
next
door
door.
to my farm, and they're into sustainability." And I tried to crack that nut like 5 seasons in a row. We would send flowers all the
Yes,
time to the person who did the events. We sent flowers to a dean of sustainability. Like, we tried so hard and we
yeah.
never got a single order from them. I don't
We
know.
did
I
the
don't
same
know.
thing. I think
Yeah.
that's it, is that the people who make those decisions have their people, and they
Yeah.
have built trust with them, and they're comfortable
Yeah.
with them, and it's really hard. That's really hard to break into.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in some ways it's reassuring in that, like, once you do have that
Yeah,
relationship, you'd have to
you're in.
really screw up bad to
Yes.
like to lose it essentially. So, yeah, it's just a matter of finding that relationship. But
Mhm.
yeah, well, once you have it, it sounds like it's a really easy
Once you're
gig.
in, it's great. It's
Yeah.
really easy. It's really, at least for us, like the feedback is always great. People are always, I think there's a low bar for corporate work. People
Hmm.
are expecting sort of, I don't know,
Yeah.
lesser than, certainly lesser than designs, and maybe not as, beautiful flowers, but we
Hmm.
always get great feedback from our corporate
Hmm.
customers, which is great.
That's awesome. So basically in terms of literally selling, so you've got the relationship already. It's maybe your first, let's say it's like your first or second event with a
Yeah.
given corporate client. So you don't have that immense trust,
Yep.
but you're in at least. Um, how are you articulating in that scenario to them? Maybe they don't even care. Maybe it's different than weddings
Sure.
where they don't care what flowers are. And like you said, you just got to match the linens, have a
Yeah.
complementary color palette. But has anybody ever wanted to see a mock-up, wanted to have more concrete sort of evidence?
Yeah, what we've done is, like I said, we will always ask for the linen and anything else. Like
Hmm.
if there's an invitation or, any of the things that might impact the color. And I don't think corporate people are always thinking like, "Oh, I should give this florist the invitation and the linens and the
Hmm.
napkins and, all of that." So we kind of ask for as much of that as we can. And then, if needed, we will put together just a sort of list of, okay, it's April and your colors are yellow and white. So, here are some examples of flowers that might be available this time of year. And I always say, like, we don't promise anything, but here's a list. So, I'll list out, a couple focals, a couple fillers. And then I will also say, in addition to those, I might say, here's a picture of a wedding or a corporate event or some other centerpiece that we did in April so that
Hmm.
you can see those same kinds of flowers. And it doesn't have to be exact. It's not like
Hmm.
the colors yellow and white and I send yellow, white, and orange. Like that's not, nobody cares about that. It's more just to say, I am a I'm a florist who can make
Can
a
do this.
centerpiece in these colors for you. Uh,
Right.
so those are the couple things that I would do. Show examples of my work and then also list out
Mm.
flowers that might be in season during that time. And that has always been plenty
Okay.
for a corporate person to go with.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you do large mood boards for corporate work the way we would do a large mood board for I can't
Mm.
even say those words. Mood board
No,
for a wedding.
no
Okay.
mood board. No mood
Yeah.
board. Mm-mm. No, I mean, they're not, no, we do have one, um, we do have one event person, but they're at the art school, so I feel like it's
Mm. Little
more
arty.
expected. Um, where they will send me a mood board, like their
Ah,
own
gotcha.
mood board. So I have, the types of chairs they're using, the types, like all of that.
Yeah.
But we just, again, slot ourselves in the same way. We're not creating any of that sort of, we're not creating any of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that makes sense. If they're an art institution,
Yeah.
obviously they want their events to look,
Yes,
polished and arty.
they're probably the only one of our corporate customers who have like a very specific
Yeah.
aesthetic for their events.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Do you find that I swear I didn't plan on having this be an episode about corporate, but now I got like questions. So why not? You're here. Let's ask.
Sure.
Do you find that there are sort of seasons to corporate work? Like in wedding world, it's like spring
Right.
is popular and fall is popular and the summer is dead. Is it kind of a similar scope of up and down
Yeah,
or?
I mean, we definitely see seasons, especially with schools. I mean, schools are
Oh yeah.
like really like clockwork. Like
Yeah.
May and June, like end of the year, going from like, end of the year celebrations, graduations, all of those receptions. We see a
Yeah.
lot of that May and June, which is a little bit of a challenge because that also is like the art school's graduation is on Mother's Day, like every year. That's
Ooh.
it's the Sunday of Mother's Day. So we do our Mother's Day stuff in the morning and then always have to plan ahead to have enough flowers and staff to be able to do the graduation dinner that night. So May
Wow.
and June is always like heavy for schools. And then we also get a big chunk like September, October when people come back to school and they're
Right.
starting to have receptions again. Corporate is a little less structured. It sort of depends on the corporation. Like definitely a lot of holiday parties. So there's definitely like a lot of holiday stuff. And then I would say people do steer away from like deep winter and summer
Mhm.
just because in our region there's not a lot of people go away during those times.
Yeah.
So definitely spring and fall and leading into the holidays are more are busier for corporate work for sure.
Okay. So it does kind of mirror
Yeah.
wedding work. Yeah. Okay. Um, and then do you see, oops, it looks like we froze a little bit. I'm gonna pause. Well, see if Ellen comes back. Hopefully our editors can edit this out. I don't know if it's me or Ellen. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
That froze.
Yeah, you froze. On my end, I had to take a big pause. So tell Eric to edit that out.
Still edit.
So, all right, we're back. Um, all right, so we talked about the corporate side of things. Is there any other nuggets about corporate that you feel like, oh, I shouldn't definitely mention that before we move on to weddings?
I don't think so. I mean, it's good work if you can get it.
Hmm. Yeah, just tricky to find. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say, I guess my only other thing to say is it's good to tell people that you want corporate work because
Hmm.
just putting it out there to your customers, to people in your community, that's how you're going to get those connections. And
Hmm.
so just putting it out there like I'm looking for more corporate work and that might be like a private school, a business, like a symphony, a big nonprofit, like just putting that out there to your community, I think will help um, make those connections.
Hmm.
Even if,
Yeah.
going to the place itself as marketing didn't really work, like making those connections, putting it out there and letting people know you want it, I think does help.
Yeah, you never know who's in your follower
Totally.
base, who happens to be the CEO of
Yes.
some like small corporation that needs to start doing events or whatever, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Have you ever done, this is always like a pet peeve of mine a little bit, but we get asked to do like nonprofit galas and stuff a lot where we're just going to donate, and so forth. And one of their like reasons we should do it is that, well, you'll make connections with other people like you'll be in the event space and
Yeah.
maybe you'll end up with some more corporate clients or whatever. They always like say like our board of directors is heavily connected. And it's like, I'm like, I don't know, you're asking me for like 5 grand worth of
Yeah.
stuff. Like this is a big gamble. Have you done that at all? Or just like no?
I'm sure we have like early on, but we definitely do not do that now.
Yeah.
There is, we have not seen any benefit to any sort of donating to
Hmm.
corporate events in that way.
Yeah.
Um, we donate to, the only time we donate flowers for events is for organizations that we are directly connected to. So
Yeah.
Creative Mornings or Farm Alliance, or, places that we have a personal direct connection with.
Hmm.
But otherwise, if you're just, a random nonprofit or organization writing to every florist in the city
Right.
looking for free flowers, I don't think it is tempting, I know, especially when you're beginning, to think that that might be a way to do it, but I don't think there's any benefit to it. You will
Yeah.
not. I don't think it's going to lead to paying work. What it's going to lead to probably is them asking you for the same free flowers again next year.
Bingo. That is the one time I did it. It was years ago. And
Right.
it was like it was like some sort of like women's conference kind of thing. It was the first time they were doing it, and they were going to have like yoga and macrame and like all
Which
these
all
like,
sounds great.
it all sounded great. And we worked so hard at this theme. We made our own like macrame wall hanging that we could thread
But
flowers
Jenny,
into and all of this stuff. I mean, my team really had fun with it, to
right.
be fair, but it was all like in the name of like, we promise this is the beginning of something great. We're going to like, I don't know. They
Yeah.
just sold it as it was going to be fantastic. And in the end, got no payment for that and never heard from them again after.
Oh, right.
So,
That is a cautionary tale. I just
yeah.
think it is tempting, and especially if it's like an event that sounds like it's a good fit for you, like,
Hmm.
"Oh, these are my people."
Yeah.
I just feel like it doesn't usually end up that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we just donate to, like I have this one pet charity that I love,
Yeah,
a wildlife rehab, clinic. I'll give them any flowers they ever want, and it's
yeah,
just because I want to support them.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, all right. So I think we've dived in deep with the corporate. Now let's talk about weddings, because this is the bread and butter of so many people in the industry. And so there's so many ways, obviously, to attract wedding clients. For me, so let's start there. How do you even get people to show up at your door in terms of like you're using local flowers, and that's part of your value proposition, and just in general, it's like who you are. So like at Local Color Flowers for Ellen, she's, only used local flowers for your whole career. And at Love and Fresh at my place, it's just flowers that I could grow myself. So these are unique models. How have we brought people to us? Like, you go first, Ellen. Tell me some ways that you've like tried to use a fishing net, so to speak, of local flowers.
Yeah. I think the first thing, and I think you probably feel the same way. The first thing is, even before trying to get the people, is consistently telling the story of
Mm,
local flowers and why that is our model, so
yeah.
that there is no question that that is what we do. It's out
Mhm.
in the world, it's on our website, it's on social media, it's in blog posts, it's everywhere, saying that that is our story and that's what we do. um,
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, we were so afraid to say this is all we do, because it felt like a constraint. I think
Hmm.
we thought that people saw it as a constraint and then thought,
Right.
oh, well, if people see it as a constraint, they might not want to choose us because we can't give them everything they want.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it was really important to us for first just like telling the story, telling why that was important, so that when people did go to the website or they did see us on social media, the first thing they could say was, "Oh, I care about that too. Now I'm going to go down that path." Or,
Hmm.
"I don't care about that. Hmm, is this like the right fit for me?
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
I'll check it out, or maybe I'll, go on and find somebody else. Or
Yeah.
the other thing is like showing our work, showing examples of our work to say, this is the kind of work we do with local flowers. So if you want, like we had somebody I remember who came in once and they were early on. And this was a very good teaching moment for me because they were like so excited and they were like, oh, we want our signature flower to be birds of paradise.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, I'm
Okay.
so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry about it all because we cleaned the shop and we bought snacks and you're here in
Yeah.
person with your parents and there is no way we can provide that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so really trying to show the work that we do. So
Mhm.
that also helps
Mhm.
attract people. So I think that is the first way. That's how we got started.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, I
Yeah.
think you did that really
Yeah,
well
for
too.
the most part. Yeah. So I also focused a lot on SEO. So one of my
Mhm.
marketing like superhero powers is SEO. I love SEO. And so I spent a lot of time on the back end of my website, making sure all the keywords were
Mhm.
there, making sure all the photos were tagged so that it would show up in searches and stuff like that. So I think part of my net that I cast had a lot to do with using terms like sustainable and locally grown, and just trying to really hope that somebody out there was putting into Google like
Right.
sustainable wedding flowers in Philadelphia, and then if they did that, then the powers of the internet meant that we showed up first at the top of the list, and then they could dive right into it. So that was maybe where I put more of my energy, and obviously, but did all the same things where we tell
Sure.
the story on the website and on social media and stuff. And in the very beginning, like very, very beginning, uh, my wedding work grew faster than my capacity to grow the flowers, and I
Yeah.
didn't have the network that you do with all the growers that you have, and Philly didn't have that many growers back then in general, and so there's maybe like 3 weddings I did early on where I did buy product
Mhm.
from the traditional wholesaler, and it wasn't like exotic stuff. It was just sort of
Sure.
like, okay, I
More
got
of
to
the
do
same.
this, because I can't not do it. And so I just made sure that those photos never showed up anywhere. They're like not existent
Totally.
anywhere. Um, and I think that's really important if you're starting your business and you're just starting to do local flowers, but this is really the way you want to go. This is part of where your heart is. Don't go posting photos that aren't what you
Right.
want. I mean, whether you're doing local flowers or not, this is just always really good advice.
Sure.
Like, don't post that photo of something you don't
Sure.
actually like because
Yeah.
somebody's going to
Or that
ask you to
you
do it
don't
again.
wanna do or you don't wanna sell. Because
Right.
we all do jobs that are either, we had to buy stuff in, or
Hmm.
this was like a design that I really did not enjoy doing, or I didn't like, or
Yeah.
wasn't representative of the kind of work that I wanna do, and we all do that.
Yeah.
But we don't put that out as a marketing piece to
Right.
say, "Come find me,"
Yeah.
because that's not
Yeah.
gonna attract the kind of customers we're looking for.
Yeah, don't even be tempted to put it in your
No,
stories on Instagram. Nowhere, people. Don't put
yeah,
it anywhere.
don't do it.
I remember like I had to do a cascade bouquet one time and I stupidly posted it. And then of course, I get a lot of people asking for cascade bouquets. You know what I hate to design more than anything in the world?
Cascade.
Cascades. They drive me
Right,
crazy.
and that's the thing. That's what happens. As soon as you
Yeah,
put it out there, they're like, "Oh, you did that great. I
right.
want that too, of course."
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, you got to be really careful where you go with that
Yes,
stuff.
agree.
So, all right. So we need to learn to tell our stories well and to articulate that local is part of the core of the business that we're doing. Or if you're a business who is just wading into local, and maybe you're not going to do
Yeah,
100%, but you want to still articulate to people that this is an option. Like sustainable floristry is an option, local is an option. So we just try to
yeah,
articulate that in every turn that we can. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So then the next step is somebody walks in the door and they're like, "Hi, we're getting married. We want you to be our wedding flower
I would say,
or
let
wedding
me
floor."
say, there's something, but even before that,
Hmm.
because, and I learned this the hard way with the birds of
With the
paradise.
birds of paradise. Hmm.
I was telling the story, I was posting the pictures, but then I was inviting everybody in for a consultation.
Hmm.
And what I was missing was this opportunity to gain more information from the customer about what they cared about, what they were looking for. And I just skipped ahead to, oh, you're interested? Come on in.
Hmm.
And what I realized with the Birds of Paradise person is if I had had some kind of way to both assess their interests before they came in and to also explain my model before they came in, we would have missed, we could have skipped ahead and said, okay, this isn't a good fit.
Yeah.
You don't have to come in.
Yeah.
So whether that's a questionnaire that you have them fill out, like a
Hmm.
little survey, asking, it could be, anything that's going to help you see if this is a good fit. Like, do you care about local flowers? Are you tied to any certain flowers? What are your colors? If somebody's like, my only color is blue and my entire wedding needs to be blue,
Like,
already you can
nope.
just be like, okay, this isn't going to work. Like, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Um, so having that sort of way to assess before having them come in
Yeah.
was really important. And then
Yeah.
also adding the piece of, let me tell you about my model before you come in and basically say, do you agree that this is okay? Because I don't want you to, I don't want to waste your time
Right.
if you don't agree.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Like I've always had a questionnaire that people have to fill out. It's just a Word document. I never did any fancy online
Yeah.
form or whatever, but it's a Word document. And in there, it would be, questions included like, what's your vision for the day? Like, what sort of energy are you looking for? And then also, like, do you have any particular flowers you're interested in? And then another question was, are there any colors you definitely do not want to have in the wedding?
Yes.
Because one of the things I always did was say, like, you guys really need to be open to a lot of color here. Like,
Mhm.
I cannot do monochromatic designs, generally speaking. Like, you got to pick at least three colors. That's what I'd
Right.
always require, like, at least three colors. And so then if I got the color that they don't want, at least then I know like, oh, they hate orange. I'm not going to put any
Yes.
orange in this design work. But yeah, I don't know how many times this has happened to you, but the number of times that people are said like, oh, we want it to be like red roses and baby's breath. And that's like an immediate like,
Oh, yeah.
sorry,
Totally.
not the
And
right
that's
place.
and that's great for everybody involved, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
That's the best case scenario because
Yeah.
you can weed out the people that are not a good fit, and they're like, "I'm weeding you out too. You're not the
Right.
right fit for me either."
Yeah.
Like, I want red roses and baby's breath. I don't wanna be convinced otherwise. I
Hmm.
don't wanna be harassed about, like, why I should want something else. I just want what I want, and if
Yeah.
you can do that, awesome, and if you can't, awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so if I ever did get those requests, the red roses and baby's breath or blue or whatever,
Hmm.
birds of paradise, um, then I could say, like, this is our model. This doesn't seem like it's a good fit because we can't provide the things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you want, but here's a florist or two in Baltimore, in our region, that can
Hmm.
provide you with what you want.
Yeah, it's always nice to have that person to
Mhm.
recommend. That just makes people feel so much better. Like you didn't let
Totally.
them down. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. One thing I do want to point out though is the number of times that I would have a couple say something like they wanted to have blue hydrangeas, which I don't generally have. I have a few blue hydrangeas, but
Right.
they're only usable like 3 weeks a year. So,
Right.
and I would, the people that said red roses and baby's breath were pretty much an immediate like no go for
Yeah.
me. But if they were listing things like hydrangeas and roses or something like that, you could kind of see the pattern of what they were listing in that
Yes.
like they probably don't actually know flowers very well, and they
Yeah.
just felt like they had to put something in this space where I asked the question So you can kind of get a sense when somebody just doesn't know
Yeah.
flowers. And then in that case, that's actually a wonderful opportunity because they're like an open book. They're like, they got no expectations other than they need some flowers.
Right.
And you may have a chance to educate and then have a customer for life. Like there's a couple of my former brides who I honestly don't think knew very much about flowers coming into it. And now there's a couple of them that are flower farmers because they got
Isn't
so
that
excited.
crazy? We
Is
have
it? It's
people like that
amazing.
too. We have
Yeah.
people like that too. And I think you're right that the more you do it, the better you will become at figuring out who
Yeah.
are the people who you can educate
Yeah.
around the issues. And one of the tools that we started using, later after we started, was Pinterest, was asking somebody in the consultation form to send us their Pinterest board. So
Hmm.
that way we could look at the Pinterest board and say, okay, you want, poppies, you want things that maybe aren't in season, but I know that in the fall I can recreate this look with local flowers. And that is the case where you can say, okay, you're a person where I might say, we're not going to have these exact flowers, but this color palette, this style, this look, we can still get that look without these specific flowers. So
Yeah.
using Pinterest, I think, we used to remember when we started, we would like have people bring in magazines. You remember
Yeah.
we had
Oh,
magazines.
yeah. And pictures,
Um,
like literal pictures.
yes, like cut out pictures.
Right.
Um, so Pinterest is just
Uh,
such an easy tool for that.
yeah.
And I guess also just to say, of course, there's caution with Pinterest
Yeah.
because we would never say, I can recreate this thing.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
recreating is not the thing
Yeah.
that we're going to do. We're not going to take a
Yeah.
design and copy it directly, but we're going to take the style and the feel and the
Hmm.
look and the colors, and we can create something new based on that
Yeah.
inspiration, but it's really just inspiration.
Yeah, and I want to even drill that a little bit more for
Yes.
the newer florists listening because I've actually had uh grooms who I've done the wedding for them and their bride, and they want to give an anniversary gift
Yes.
to their wife, their now wife, and they will ask me to recreate the bridal bouquet as, just as a centerpiece. And I have one groom. He's wonderful. I love him dearly. He's done this for like 10 years in a row. And every year I have to say, it's different this year. I can't
Yeah.
actually recreate that because I'm only using the flowers that are in bloom. When I'm doing wedding flowers, I'm custom growing for you. Like I had a whole crop plan for you. Like I don't have that crop plan this year. And
Right.
he's always so understanding. He's like, I know. I just wanted to say like as close as it can
Right.
get to it. And so this is just to say that even me, I'm the florist that made the
Right.
thing in the first place, and I grew the flowers and all the things. Like there's no way to replicate the exact same thing. And I don't even think for a traditional florist who's buying flowers from a wholesaler,
Sure.
you could even do that either. So that's just to say, never promise to make anything look
Absolutely.
exactly alike. And this is one reason, just to pick on mock-ups a little bit. This is why I think mock-ups are the dumbest idea ever. I'm just going to be
I
really blunt
agree.
about it. Like,
Hot
I don't know
take
where
from
this
Jennie
came
Love.
from.
Mock-ups suck.
They suck so bad. Like it definitely sucks for us because we're seasonal and local, so we cannot do it. Like you just cannot. Like good luck trying
Yeah.
unless the person's coming to you exactly on their wedding date, like a year ahead or
And even
something.
that.
And even then you can't necessarily. But for a traditional florist, even like the stuff that you get from week to week, the quality, what it's going to be like, I think that florists that do mock-ups are just setting themselves up for basically disaster because the client's going to think that they're going to get exactly what they're going to get. So don't do mock-ups, in my opinion. That's one. If you do them, you better charge a lot of money.
And explain that it is not going to be this exact thing.
Yeah,
There is
yeah,
just no way,
yeah.
especially with local flowers. It is not going to be the same thing
Not
at
an
all.
option. Yeah,
But I
no.
will say that like that, the flip side of what you're talking about can also be used as a marketing tool especially for weddings, because you can say, this is a one of a kind design. This is
Absolutely.
only being made once for you, and it'll
Mm-hmm.
never be recreated. This is not a
Mm-hmm.
recipe. This isn't from a recipe book. This is something I'm creating for you. And not only is it just for you, but it's also rooted in the time and the day and the place that you're getting married.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there is nothing that is going to represent that day and that moment more than having flowers that represent that. And so
Yeah.
for us, that's always people. If you're our people, like that is definitely a selling point.
Yeah. And I like to say too to people, like, I'm going to use flowers you've never even heard of, that you've never seen, that are going to, on the day of your wedding, you are going to be so surprised in the best possible way, where you'll be like, oh my God, look at this floating white butterfly thing, which happens to be called agrostema, that is just beautifully stitched with silver thread in the middle. And it's just like, yeah, look at these flowers. They're like
Yeah,
amazing.
totally.
And so if you can articulate that to your customers, that they're going to get things they've never seen, they've never even thought of, they're going to have fragrances that they've never
Yeah.
imagined, that are going to be memory making fragrances for the rest of their life. So yeah, there's a big selling
Yeah.
point to that.
And
And
even just in you describing that also just brings up for me, like, sharing your excitement
mhm,
with the customer about the flowers, because like you said,
yeah.
they may not know any of the flowers that you're talking about using. They may not
Hmm.
be, when you start talking about agrostema, they're gonna be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, why are you telling me this?
Right.
But when you are excited about the vision and about the flowers and about what can be created, I think that also builds trust with the customer, because
Hmm.
they recognize you get their vision, you get what they're talking about, you're excited about the thing that they have communicated they want,
Yeah.
and that makes them feel more at ease, I think, choosing you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I also want to just pedal back just a second to something you said, and I want to enhance that you're saying about, like, the flowers are grown and they're going to be on this day of this, say you're getting married August, the second Saturday in August, like every second Saturday in August for the rest of your life. If you live in the Baltimore region, if you got flowers from
Yeah.
Ellen, you're going to essentially see your flowers like out in the landscape. I just had an episode with Grace from Flower Club here on Floral Guild Radio, and she was talking about that and related to funeral work, actually. And it was like such a powerful moment when she said it. I was like, oh, that just like, wow, because she was saying that if you're using local flowers in sympathy work, then forevermore, when somebody sees something like a black-eyed Susan, they're going to think in a good way. It's a good memory. Initially, it's
Yeah,
it's when it comes to
of
funeral work,
course.
it's a heart-wrenching emotion. But then 5, 10 years later, every time you see the black-eyed Susans, you still have this beautiful, loving memory of the person who's gone. And the same can be said for weddings. It's like
For
every time you see those flowers out in the landscape, it's like a celebration of your wedding day all over again. So that's a pretty cool way of selling
That is
it too.
cool.
Yeah, I like that, like, heartfelt connection to the
Mhm.
earth. So yeah. Um, so we talked a little bit about like colors, and then how do you sell style? Like, did you, for me, I've always said that my style is earthy elegant. I don't know when I came up with that, but that was what we went with, people.
I love
Okay.
it.
So did you ever come up with words for local color
Yeah.
flowers? So, like,
We always said, when I asked the question in the consultation, like, what's your style? I would
yeah.
say, you know, are you thinking like you want the flowers to feel very formal and round? Um, or do you want them to feel natural? And then in natural, I would say for us, that means letting the flowers do what they do naturally. So
Hmm.
not forcing them into a shape, but letting them be as they are. And I feel
Hmm.
like that got the point across, because then we could take it another step further where we would say, or do you want it like really wild? Because our style is not really wild. It is
Yeah.
that natural style. It is letting things do what they do naturally, but it is not, a crazy, we're
Yeah.
not having huge branches, or we
Yeah.
can do that, but that is a wild style.
Hmm. Hmm.
So those were kind of the three
Okay.
options that we
Yeah.
gave. Very round and formal, more natural, very wild. Those were
Yeah.
kind of the three. And never did I offer a cascade bouquet.
You were so much smarter than me.
No.
Uh, so was there ever anybody came in with a style where you're like, yeah, or did
I
you
mean,
always feel like you could recreate whatever with local?
there were definitely, I don't think the issue was could I recreate it with local? It was more could I recreate it with my skills? Um,
Mm, mm,
like that to me, sometimes I would look at like really wild bouquets and um like for me that is a challenging design to make, like that really big over the top. Um so I knew I could do it, but that sort of always made me nervous. But I never really felt there was a style itself that couldn't be recreated. I think probably the one that is like would be the most challenging that I would say, like if somebody was like, I want just only one flower, or I
mm-hmm. Oh
don't
yeah.
want I don't want foliage and I want one flower.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
like we had people who only wanted like, I mean, this sounds very simple, but it actually is not, like a bouquet of just sunflowers.
Oh God, no,
And I'm like, "Okay, I can do it, but it is not, you think that that seems easy. It is
it's
not easy.
not. Yeah.
Sunflowers are oddly shaped, they're gigantic, their stems
Mm-hmm.
are thick. So to just be like, "Oh, just a bouquet of sunflowers." We had one wedding who the customer is like a great friend of ours now, and she's one of those people that like now does design. She gets a
Yeah.
bucket subscription. But I remember thinking like, "Oh, you think that that sounds so simple."
Nice.
And it is not simple. It is really challenging.
Yeah.
So those were probably the only ones where I felt like really challenged with the style based on
Yeah.
the flowers.
Yeah. I have a similar story with although you would think it was easy too, with peonies. One of my brides
Oh,
wanted only white peonies and she wanted it this beautiful round ball. And hey, I got skills when it comes to European hand dyes. Like I can do the
sure.
spiral maybe, but like I oh my goodness, it was the hardest
Really hard.
bouquet I ever made because there was nothing else in the bouquet, it had to be perfect.
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 Yeah.
And it's just like I think I ended up putting like 50 peonies in this bouquet. I'm embarrassed to say. But I was just like, I have to because I was using big ones, but then I was like, oh, I'm gonna use buds too, because like I need something to fill in the gaps. And I so lost money on that bouquet. But it's just to say, like, I personally need foliage, first of all. Like if I'm
Yeah.
doing a design, I need foliage. That's just where it's at
Yeah.
for me. So yeah.
And I
So
think
I
that's something that new florists should think about. Like if somebody is saying like, I just want one flower,
mhm.
whether it's dahlias, oh my God, like an all dahlia
Oh,
bouquet,
yeah, you're
or
gonna break every head.
right, or like all ranunculus or all tulips or whatever. Like I think that is a style that is challenging, and you really do have to watch your pricing, like you
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
because it can get out of control quick.
Yeah, I would say if somebody's asking you to do just a one style flower, one flower bouquet,
Yeah.
I would double the price. Like I
Yes.
would like do a stem count in my head and then I would literally double it
Yeah.
because you're gonna break stuff or it's just gonna take way more stems than you
And it
think
just
it is.
depends on like how open you can have things and how
Mm-hmm.
like, what stage they're at. Like making sure they're all
Yeah.
at the right stage is challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky style, that's for sure. So, but to go back to selling local to wedding customers in particular. So we've talked. We need to get them to choose colors. You can't just do all blue, or for me, I never would just do all white. And that's tricky for me. But you have to think about styles. So we're talking colors and styles. We're not talking about specific flowers.
No.
Like you try to avoid that as much as possible. I would. So on my end, because I was doing a custom crop plan for my couples, my full service couples, I would like show them different flowers and just try to figure out if they liked that kind of flower. Because I didn't want to put something in the crop plan that they were going to
Yeah.
be like, ugh. So there was some going through specific flowers, but at the end of the day, when it came to writing the proposal, I would always I did put, the potential flowers that would be used so that they have something to refer to. But I would always say likely to include, but not guaranteed, so that they
Yeah.
knew that there was some room for wiggle there. Did you have any language in your proposal specific to like sort of setting expectation?
I mean, yes to setting expectations, but and which I think is the key to all of this, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
managing people's expectations.
Yeah.
So I was always like deathly afraid from, early trauma of putting name of a flower in a
Yeah.
contract. Um, I was always really afraid to put flowers in there.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I would show them our Pinterest board. Here's what could be available. But in the contract, I would only say, this is the color palette, this is the style, and we're
Hmm.
going to use locally sourced flowers. You can check the Pinterest board of what those could be, but
Hmm.
we would not list flowers in
Mm.
there. What I would do on occasion is say, like, if somebody was like, I love ranunculus, it's my favorite flower, I would make a note in the contract to say the client has communicated that ranunculus is their
Mm.
favorite flower. If it's available, we'll use it, but
Okay.
not a list of, 20 things. It was like if they had one special thing, and as much of that was to give myself a reminder,
Right.
like,
Yes.
oh, this person for whatever reason loves
Yeah.
sunflowers, let me make
Yeah.
sure to see if they're available.
Yeah.
Um, but never, and we would always, in the consultation, I think going back to the managing the expectations and the language, uh,
Hmm.
we would write this in the contract as well. We can never promise a certain type of flower. That was in the email at the beginning, it was in the
Yeah.
contract, it was in the consultation, it's in everything that we say and do.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
cannot promise a certain type of flower. Just
Yep.
always, always, always. Um, and then a little bit more of like, uh, this is the color palette, and the color palette, if it's red, that can be red burgundy, that
Hmm.
can be red orange. This is a
Right.
continuum. This is not,
Right.
we're not matching the
We're
flower
not
to
matching.
shoes.
Yeah. No fabric swatches here, people.
No fabric swatches.
Yeah.
And in the consultation, even before the contract, we would also say, just so that they really understood,
Mm.
you are not going to know what you're getting until I arrive on the day of your wedding. I would
Yeah.
always say that. And it did seem a little bit like a shock if you weren't
Hmm.
in like really following along.
Right. In the
But I
know.
really wanted that to be clear. Like, you're not calling me the week before and asking what's in there. You're not
Hmm.
going to know until I arrive what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if
I
you
think it's so
love
good.
that, excellent. And if you hate that,
Then
no
don't hire
worries.
us.
There's somebody else
Right.
that will help you. Yeah.
Right.
Because that is, that's when you start to get into clients' propensity towards controlling
Yeah.
this
Control.
situation.
Yeah.
And, you know, that maybe helps everybody realize, oh, that is not something in a sea of things I can control for this wedding. That is one thing I will not be able to control.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like mothers of the brides too, you need to
Oh,
really like rein them in. I
that is
never,
like a whole nother issue.
because they're like the hardest
Yes.
selling point, like because usually the couples come in and they have bought the story, so to speak.
Yes.
They love what you do. They are much more interested in sustainability. And then you
Mhm.
get to the mother of the bride who's just tagging along for the consultation, and they haven't gotten the memo about all the
Yes.
awesomeness, and then they also don't understand what local flowers are or what's going to be around, and they just expect the traditional sort of
Yep.
look and style, and then you have to sit there and try to validate your process to somebody who's usually older than you and looking down at you.
Yes. That
That
is
was always
really hard.
hard.
Really
Yeah.
hard. And
Yeah.
we had a client who was like she worked in sustainability, super
Hmm.
into what we were doing, booked us paid the deposit, and like 2 weeks later was like, "We're canceling because my dad is paying and he does not understand that he won't know what the product is that
Oh
he's
no.
buying before we get it." And so I think there is the parents or
Hmm.
whoever might be paying or who might be influencing, that is a real challenge, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And in those instances, I would try really hard to focus on the couple and try
Yeah.
to advocate for them, because a lot of times in those scenarios, they were sort of being, bulldozed over by a
Mm,
dominant parent. And it's just sort of like they should have the wedding that they want. But at a certain point, you start to realize, like, I'm not winning this battle. And then that's when it's time to just give them the name of a more traditional florist,
yes,
and it's okay.
it's okay.
Hopefully they'll hire you for their kids' birthday parties or something.
Right.
So yeah. So all right. Oh, and I want to just make sure to highlight and emphasize that if you are doing local flowers, and again, I think even if you're not doing local flowers, you should have contract language that protects
Yes.
you if you don't get everything exactly as they thought it would be. So we have a substitution clause in my contract for weddings that it basically gives us free reign, essentially. It basically says we can make any substitutions needed. If it's going to compromise the overall vision of the event, then we would let the couple know in advance as soon as we could possibly know. But I never actually ever let a couple know, even if we
Yeah.
did have to change things, because by the time you're going to have to change things, it's too late. That
It's
ship
too late for
sailed.
them to do anything about
Like,
it.
right. It's just going to make people stress in advance. And I think just show up with gorgeous flowers and everybody's usually very happy once you're there.
We had similar language, and I think we didn't put it in until probably too late. Not too
Yeah.
late, but, after something happened.
Yeah.
But we definitely did put in there, that we can make those decisions on our own.
Yeah.
The other thing that we put in there that I think was, somewhat helpful, especially for like a parent or, somebody that might be somewhat more nervous, was to always say, because one of the questions you always get is like, what if there's a hurricane? What if there's a tornado?
Yeah.
What if there's
Hmm.
whatever, how will we not have flowers? So I would always have a clause in there that said, in case of some emergency, whatever the emergency is,
Hmm.
we will buy from the wholesaler. We have a wholesale
Right.
account, and that was in the contract so that
Yeah.
somebody could see, like, there's no chance of you not getting the
Yeah.
flowers. It's
Yeah.
just, we will source them from wherever we have to, of course. But we've never had to do that. I always
Hmm.
say, like, we've worked through we've worked through snowstorms, we've worked through hurricanes, we worked through all kinds of things. We've not had to do that, but that is always there as a backup if
As
we
a
need
backup.
to.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think for newer florists starting out, they get anxiety about having a contract, about having like a long, complicated contract or whatever. And I'm not here to say you should have like a really long,
Yeah.
complicated contract, but I am here to say like a contract protects both parties. So
Yes.
when you're worried about somehow trying to convince somebody to sign this legal document for you, remember that you're protecting them too. Like with that kind of language, Ellen, what you're saying, it's like it's a way of reassuring them as well. It's just putting all the expectations on the table and all the processes on the table. And so it's not something that we should try to like avoid a contract.
No.
I hear some newer florists sometimes getting really anxious about having a contract, but it's like you really, really need to have it and use
Yeah.
it more as a communication tool than
Yeah.
even a legalese kind of thing. Like I put all sorts of things in my contract
Me too.
because it's probably the only thing they're going to actually read in
Yeah.
detail. So put it in
Yeah.
there.
For sure. I mean, yes, I think everybody, right from the beginning, just, go with the contract.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, and then did you do mood boards when you sent your proposals over for weddings?
I didn't.
You didn't.
No.
Wow, you probably saved hours and hours and hours of
All
time.
right, but look it, you and I had let's break this down for a minute because we
Yeah,
had
yeah.
very different,
Clientele.
um,
Yeah,
clientele and
yeah,
very different budgets,
yeah.
right?
True, true.
So we were, um, I would say we were not being paid to create mood boards for our customers.
Yeah.
Um, if somebody paid me a lot more money and said I want a mood board, of course I would have done that. But just we were not. That was not the type of. We didn't offer it, and these customers were not paying for it. Let me
Right.
say that.
Right. That's
So
fair.
tell me
That's fair.
all about mood boards.
Oh, well, mood boards. They're so fun. No, so initially, I did mood boards in Pinterest. Way back in the day, I did Pinterest, I did a PowerPoint
Oh
presentation
my
mood board.
god!
Yes, I'm showing how old I
Oh,
am.
I love it.
But once Pinterest came along, I would do Pinterest boards for them. But and those are very useful for sure. And I would only use my own work on the Pinterest board or
Mhm.
any mood boards. It's always just been my own work. I try
Yeah,
never to include anybody else's work. I will sometimes maybe include a zoomed in photo of like a flower that I didn't actually take the
yeah,
photo of myself, but I just needed that one flower color or whatever. But try to only use my own design work. So I'm articulating, what I can deliver. Um, so they were very, very useful in communicating at the beginning of my journey, like what we could provide and
right.
what local flowers looks like. And I had a huge library of Pinterest boards. And like you, I would send people to Pinterest just to see like what flowers might be available at certain times and so forth. So there was a Pinterest board for May, and it would be all
That's
the
what we
flowers
had.
in May, and um, but over time with Pinterest, I started to find that couples were getting sort of overwhelmed by that process. And it also felt like every florist did Pinterest boards and stuff. So I ended up moving into doing private mood boards again with some software. I used Adobe for a little while. And anyway, there's different ways you can make mood
Sure.
boards. But yeah, they're so time consuming. They were initially really fun when you're new to it
Oh,
all, and it's like,
yeah.
oh, this is so fun. And I've seen some
And when you
very
have, like,
elaborate ones.
5 weddings a year,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Like, when
exactly.
you
Yeah,
had not
yeah,
much to do.
right, exactly. Um, but after a while, yeah, it was just so time consuming. And what I was finding was that, I had a very streamlined proposal process in terms of putting my proposals are line item proposals. So like it'll be like there's a line item for the bridal bouquet and a description for the bridal bouquet and the price for the bridal bouquet and then the bridesmaids and blah 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 down the line. And those were very formulaic for me at a certain
Mhm.
point. So that was easy, and I could have churned out the proposal itself and the contract itself within like, a day.
Yeah,
But then the mood board, oh my God, the mood board I would just get stuck on the stupid mood
right.
for like days and days. And I was just like, yeah. So I think they're a very useful tool, but I
Mhm.
also think they can really suck time away. So I don't really have any grand insights other than to say be careful with mood boards. I mean, I definitely sold people. It was a good sales tool. I definitely sold people on my on my style and on the price point. So as you
Yeah,
were saying, like my price point is um pretty elevated, and
yeah,
so you did need something to sort of justify that
yeah.
in and of itself.
And I
But
think
yeah,
that's, something that if you're new and you're starting out, if you are gonna do, Pinterest boards or mood boards or something, I think figure out a way to include that in the price so that you are
yeah,
not feeling like, "Oh, I'm doing all this work on these proposals and, I'm not
yeah,
getting, anything for it."
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They do take a lot of time.
Yeah.
um I had a question. It was actually a really good question, and now I just lost it. Yeah,
It'll come
old
back.
fart. It'll come back to me, I think, with time. Maybe. Anyway, uh, so those are basically the ways that we're, trying to sell flowers, like in a local flowers to wedding customers. Oh, I know what my question was. Whew, there it came. Um, when you were a new florist and not that familiar with flowers because you came into it from a construction background, not like zero flower
0.
education.
Yes,
So
0.
that must have been a fun journey. How did you learn what flowers were in season. So like not only do you have to like educate your customers, you had to educate yourself in the beginning. So do you have any ways, do you
I was
remember
really
that?
learning as I went.
Yeah.
Um, I think number one was working with local farmers to see their availability.
Mm,
So whether they were sending an availability list, or I was going to the market and seeing what flowers were available on, every
hmm
week.
hmm
Um, I think those were the two ways that I learned. I mean, now I think if you can get on an availability list, if you can get on a list that a farmer is sending out in your region with an
hmm
availability list, for me, that was and still is honestly like one of the number one tools that I use to learn about new flowers, foliages, branches. Um, I'm still learning, and there's still new
Yeah.
things that people are growing. That is how I learn,
Yeah.
have learned, and anybody can do that. I will say that if you are a person who's like, I want to be a florist this year, I don't really know anything about flowers, you can learn about flowers.
Yeah.
I think, really taking the time to use those availability lists or relationships with growers, or great, go out to a farm, visit, see how things are grown. Again, this is like another marketing tool, honestly, for somebody who, I mean, you have it better because you are a farmer, but like any way that I can connect a customer to where those flowers are grown, to say, here's this picture, here's this video,
hmm
here's this way that they do it, here's this amazing story about these special peonies or these special, any way that you can sort of connect your customer back to where the flowers are
Yeah.
coming from. But I would say that if the farmers honestly are my number one way of still learning about flowers.
Learning. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And as a farmer, it
Mhm.
took seasons upon seasons to know
Yeah.
when things were going to be in season, to predict, to be able to say, like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, at the end of May, we are going to have, unless some god awful thing happens, we're going to have agrostema and we're going to have dianthus and we're going to have peonies and blah, blah, blah. So, one thing I'll say for listeners of Floral Guild Radio who also buy from the Philly Floral Guild is we do have what we call bloom forecasts available. So
Great.
this is on our website. If you go to philadelphia.com and you go to the news tab or blog tab, and you look under there, we have bloom forecasts for each month. So
Amazing.
each month starting March and then it goes through November, and you can just get a snapshot that way. That's an easy way to get a snapshot of what is likely to be in season. And I try to update those bloom forecasts every year based, because our weather is changing
Yeah.
and things are getting warm. So,
Great.
um, so that's one way you can, if somebody's new to buying local and they want to get an idea of what's available in the Mid-Atlantic region, at least, that's a good way to do it. And then also, if you're an existing PFG customer, the Philly Floral Guild customer, you can go back into your account where you buy flowers from us and you can go to old orders. And this is one of my little
Great.
secret tricks for
I do this
figuring this
all the
out.
time.
I
I do
know.
this all the time.
Go in and I sort by, I think there's like June 15th or something. I'll be like, I'll go find all the orders for the week before, the week
Yeah.
of, and the week after, just sort those, pull the product in from those orders and be like, okay, this is a very good snapshot of what's probably going to happen for this
Yeah.
specific date. So that's a little trick. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
definitely do that. Look back at old invoices,
Yeah.
any, emails that I sent like on that day to growers, or growers sent lists, through emails.
Yeah.
I'm always going back and looking at those.
Yeah. Yeah. It gives you a good snapshot. And also it's a good way to look at the prices that you would have
Yeah.
gotten for those. So this is my sort of final question about selling local to event work, is that we have to price this stuff like, a year in advance of
Yeah.
when we're going to actually get the product. And I
Mhm.
guess this applies to traditional florists as well. So forgive me if I'm, if I'm making this a local problem, but um, how did you price for a year in advance when you didn't even know what you were likely to have? Like, what was
Yeah.
your strategy for that?
I mean, that's the thing, like, at least a conventional florist might have a sense that they can get the same flowers,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot more availability.
Yeah.
For us, we had to figure out a way to price, and this is going to sound like really convoluted, but we really had to come up with a price per item
Mm-hmm.
and then work work our design into that
Yeah.
price,
Back into that number. Yeah. Yeah. That's
because
the way
we
we did
just
it too.
couldn't know. We could not know with any certainty
Mm-hmm.
what, I mean, peonies are a great example. Like in our region, peonies could start Memorial Day, they could start Mother's Day, or like
Mm-hmm.
last year, they started in April. Like
Yeah.
there is just no way. So if I'm pricing a bouquet based on the price of peonies, and then what I end up with is like agrostema, then,
Right.
like this is like, or vice versa, I guess is the worst
Right.
way. There's just no, there was no way that we could figure out to do it except to
Yeah.
do it as um as a price per item and then back
Mm-hmm.
to the price.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because you can't write a recipe in advance when you just have zero idea. I mean, maybe that's the difference for traditional florists is they can write the recipe with specific flowers in
Right.
mind, and then if it's like 2, 3 weeks out, because I think traditional florists can place their orders,
Yep.
3+ weeks out if they're buying from the right wholesaler,
Right.
and then they're like, okay, I'm not getting that thing, so now I got to go find something else. So maybe there's a little bit more structure to it. But yeah, the same happens up here for Love and Fresh Flowers. Like we just have sort of like the general number for,
Yep.
say, a centerpiece, like, and it depends on the size. You were
And the
saying
shape
before about
and
you have
the,
the different styles. Yeah, small, medium, large, elevated, low, all of those things. So
mhm,
it can be anywhere from, $175 to $600 if it's a big elevated piece. So, but then you just back into that number once you get
yeah.
to the day of actually doing it. One of the things as a flower farmer that I would struggle with was putting too much value into my designs. So like, because I have a whole field, and like if there was a lot of extra peonies in the cooler that
Oh yeah.
needed to be used, I'm gonna put them in. So I would sometimes lots of times overfill my designs.
Mhm.
But I had very happy customers. One of the things that I have found over the years that's very helpful, that might help other newer florists too, is what I call post-mortem pricing. So it's like you've done the wedding. So what I would do is, so we've got this, we put this proposal
Gosh, I
together.
can't believe we never talked about this and
Oh
we do the
yeah,
same thing.
you do the same thing?
Yes.
Oh, great. So it's
And
not
it
just us.
seems
Great.
so backwards to
Yeah.
like price things after
Yeah.
it's done.
Yay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. Well, because it just gives you a checkpoint.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of like you spitball like, oh, particularly if you're really new. So if you're really new, you have no idea what to charge. So you'll be like, okay, I'm going to do this $100 centerpiece, and then you can put it all together and send it out the door and never know if it was really $100. Like if you had a
Yeah.
profit, would you lost, whatever. So what is very important, a big piece of advice for newer designers is write the recipe as you go. Like as you're designing, you pulled 5 peonies to put in this design. Okay, there's a sheet of paper over here, and you say 5 peonies. And then at the end of your design, you'll know exactly what you had. And obviously, you're too damn busy right then to actually like do the math, and that's fine. Put that sheet on a clipboard somewhere that you're going to find it after the wedding.
Right.
And then you come back and you actually price it out. You do the math legitimately, you do the markup, you do all the things. We had a podcast episode before between Elle and I about price per stem and all the math.
Yeah.
And you do that. And a lot of times I'm going to be very honest with everyone. In the beginning, I was seriously like, I was charging like $100, hopefully, but I was probably sending out $250 arrangements because you just
Yeah.
don't understand the math in the
Totally.
beginning.
And I'll say that here's a little bit different though that we did is that we will often make that recipe like the day before the wedding
Mhm.
when we're
Yeah, yeah,
making the
yeah,
design
yeah.
and count it up price it out and tweak the design
Mm-hmm.
for the next 20 that we're going to make.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if it's 5 peonies and we're like, we really can't do 5 peonies. Let's do 4 peonies and put a
Yeah.
bunch of extra bachelor's buttons in.
Yeah.
Or, something like that, so that we can get that gut check right away.
Yeah.
And be able to carry that over into the other designs. Sometimes you can't make that work, but a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we could make those adjustments for more foliage or more filler or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And that definitely happened for me once I started using other people helping me with the
Oh,
designs.
yeah.
In the very beginning, it was just me and
Yeah.
I was too busy and I didn't have a chance. But once I started making the sample, so yeah, I would always make the sample on Wednesday and then I have the recipe. Then I can do the pricing. Then I can decide how to futz things
Yeah.
around and move things around. One of the things I found, and I don't know if you found this too, Ellen, we were like picking on peonies as like, oh, they're expensive. Don't put too many in. But sometimes I found that I could bring the price point way down if I took out some of those like bachelor buttons and agrostema because they don't have a huge impact on a
And
design.
you
So
have
I
to
might
put
have
like
written
30 of them in.
right, exactly. I might have done the sample recipe with like 7 agrostema because as we can tell from this
Right.
episode, I love agrostema. But
Yeah.
it's like $1 a stem or $1.20 a stem or whatever. And you start adding that up and the math really adds up
Yeah.
fast. And you look at the design and you're like, you know what? Just one beautiful floating agrostema is still giving the same energy
Yeah.
as
Right.
7 of those. So, and that's when you're like, oh, yank, 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 we're getting rid of those other
Right. Then you
6
sleep. Right.
agrostema. Right. So that I think that's one of the things as newer designers we often want to put in all the cute little bits because we don't value ourselves well enough. Yeah, let's say that. Or because we love flowers.
Right.
But you often put an extra, I would say like some centerpieces, you could put an extra 20 stems in there that
Yes.
aren't actually making any impact. They're
Yes.
just there because you can't stop.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
that's just getting better at design and the gut check together.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which you'll get there in time.
Yeah. Yes.
So, are there any other ways that you really work intentionally to sell local to weddings that you think are specific to weddings?
I think the only other thing I would say, especially if you're starting out, is the importance of trying to partner with other vendors that have the same values as you or the same
Mm,
models as you, because oftentimes, you know, so much of event work is like referrals or, oh, I am a photographer. You booked me. I also have a friend that's a florist that I trust and
mhm,
love, like, that sort
mhm.
of referral. So trying to find, sort of your group of vendors that you can refer back and forth to each other. I mean, I would say, so much of our work was based on that kind, especially
Yeah.
for local flowers, especially if you have hired, usually you're going to hire your caterer first. And if you want local food, your caterer, if you can get in with a caterer that can say, oh,
Mhm.
I also have a florist who does local flowers, that is like,
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
great. I mean, for us, like at Woodbury, that was probably like our number one. Woodbury is a restaurant in Baltimore that does
Mhm.
all local food and they do events. And so partnering with them just made sense. It made sense for them, for us, for the customer. And it just was like an easier, it was like one less step for the customer when somebody
Yeah.
can just say, oh, they care about the same things we all do, call them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So trying to find those partners, I think early on, I think will really be beneficial.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also just want to shout out Woodbury, my very favorite restaurant anywhere ever. So for the record, if you're in Baltimore, go to Woodbury Kitchen. Okay. Uh, I wanted to mention, just came into my head this idea of public relations, PR, press, so to speak.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, this is where I have to admit I'm a little out of the loop, but I can only talk about what happened in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So when we were first starting to get traction as wedding florists, blogs, like, gosh, I can't even remember all of them, but there were a lot of blogs
Sure.
dedicated to weddings. Um, And it was like a big deal to get featured on one of these wedding blogs. And that was before Instagram and everything. And I remember sometimes I would get featured on a wedding blog and it was such a feather in the cap. But then what I would find is I was getting unqualified leads from that, where people were just like quickly drawn into like, oh, I saw you in wedding shoes. It's like, like you must be a cool
Right.
vendor. But they were not the right customers. And it had to do a lot of weeding out. And then I had the good fortune of being featured in Martha Stewart, and that is like amazing press, but it actually never really led to any really good qualified leads because people were just attracted to the fact that it was like big press or whatever. So I wanted to just say that if you want to attract the right clients, which you need, to do, I would, if I was, trying to hit press again, specifically for building a wedding business on local flowers, I would be looking to the local small town
Yes.
newspaper and I would be trying to get just, pitch a story to them, pitch a profile to them, get them to talk about, all the things we're saying here, like
Yeah.
why this is important, tell the story of the flowers, all the things. So instead of looking to these like bigger picture press opportunities, just drill down to
Yeah.
small and local, which is what we're trying to do
And
anyway.
that may not seem, because I know, I mean, you probably felt it too. Like when we were coming up, it was like to be in Martha Stewart, to
Yeah.
be, like those were like the pinnacle of,
Hmm.
being seen as a
Yeah.
florist. But you're so right that if you're in like, Baltimore Magazine or
Hmm.
your local wedding magazine or, your local wedding bloggers blog, those are the places that are
Yeah.
going to get you the actual work.
Yeah.
um, and not just, this looked great and I got a lot of interest, but it didn't
Yeah.
translate to work.
Yeah. Yeah. There was this one newspaper article that is still getting me. It's like 17 I don't know. Yeah, 17 years ago. It was like the very first thing was ever written about me.
Yeah.
I was here in Philly. And I still get people that bring up that
Yeah.
article all the time. And it was about my farm and how I was doing something new and different and wasn't this a crazy idea that this woman
Yeah.
grows the flowers for you and how cool and everything like that. So yeah, so look for those more niche kind of
Yes.
PR moments, which do help build your credibility, which is really helpful when you are sitting down with the mother of the bride and she doesn't necessarily think you're good enough.
You can
You can,
say, "Here
here's,
here's the
yeah,
proof."
right. Exactly. Exactly. So, all right. That was a fun conversation. So I think we'll wrap it up for now, but everybody should come on back. We're going to talk about retail sales of local flowers in the next episode after this. So, but thank you, Ellen, for being here and letting me pick your brain.
Always fun.
Yay.